Hi, I'm Tim. Please join me in this video as I discuss lessons learned from my design and crash of a foam board F4 Phantom RC model airplane. Let's get to it. I've been flying full-scale aircraft for about the past 50 years in addition to radio control model aircraft, and a constant theme of full-scale flying is what we call lessons learned. We spend a lot of time studying accidents, unsafe situations, so we can learn from them to hopefully not do that same situation. In private aviation, these columns in the various magazines go along the titles of something like, I learned about flying from that. And they're extremely useful tools to be a better pilot, because you see pilots that are trying to do their best and just something happened. It could be night flying, instrument conditions, whatever, that caused them to almost have a very serious accident. So what I want to do is take that approach in this video and some other videos. I've learned about RC flying from that and apply the lessons learned that we can do a better job with our RC flying. In this video, I'll go through the design process that I used to build a foam board F4 Phantom. It was a pretty aggressive design to begin with, just the nature of the model. It did not fly. We'll go through the video later on. I'll show it, the full video, the slow motion explanation of it. But I think there's some pretty good lessons learned from it. As a reminder for viewers, if you put your mouse, hover down below in the timeline, the video is broken up in individual chapters if you want to go ahead to a certain section of the video. So before we get into the design of my F4 Phantom, a little bit of background, what kind of inspired me to try the F4. And this is a very common thing with modeling. You try some idea, you like it, you learn from it, see if you can evolve it to something else. And what I did in this case was I built this model of a foam board F22. It's really a quite nice model. It's made all from 3/6" foam board. I'll put the link up here and in the description if you'd like to see the full build process for this. It builds in a couple of days. It's not my design, it's somebody else's plan. Uses a pusher motor and elevons, but the plane flies pretty well. So let's take a look at a video of the F-22 flying, and the important learning point is you're going to see that it survived a hand launch. I just kind of threw it underhanded into the air. It wobbled a little bit, but then it caught flight and flew quite well, but the hand launch is going to be the learning point that we'll glean from the F4 design. So the F-22, I liked the way that flew. It certainly looked good in the air. I said, well, why not do a foam board F4? And so I started to do that. The idea was would make it out of 3/6" foam board, same as for the F-22 and a lot of my other foam board designs you can see on the channel. I'm going to use the same motor. It had plenty of thrust, same electronics. It'd be about the same weight. The big difference is the wing was probably going to be a little bit smaller on the F4, and the nose moment, the distance, how far out the nose was certainly a lot more. And I elected to put the motor onto the nose for the F4 version. So let's take a quick look at the drawing up the plans, enlarging the plans, and building the F4 Phantom for foam board. We'll take a quick look at those procedures now. Here are the plans. I did them at FedEx office from QCAD, copying 3 view, so it's full size for the foam board. And another view of the plans, I'm starting to visualize the location of the motor and see where that fits onto the front. This is laying out the electronics to see where the servos are going to go, the motor, keeping a close eye on the center of gravity. A lot of weight had to be located further aft to have this model balance out due to the swept wing. This is the 3 view that I initially used. This is a cutout of the wing. You see the cutouts for the ailerons and the tip dihedral, the fuselage with the tail slot, and you can see the plywood reinforcing and the initial mounting of the motor. Here's the wing mounted to the fuselage with the aileron cutouts and the elevated wingtips. And here's a view of the anhedral tail installed onto the model with the rudder, with the elevators that have to be added for this. Close up with the controls taped in place, you can see it starting to look a little bit like an F4 with a front view of the motor and the sketching for the paint to show some outline of the jet, doublers for the aileron servos, then the ailerons themselves. And finally, the finished model ready to take out to the field. So the F4 is complete. The weight is okay. It's about the same as the F-22. It has conventional controls, elevator, ailerons, and throttle. There's no rudder needed on this model. I was a little bit concerned with a small wing. I think in retrospect I should have made the wing bigger, but the wing was there. My idea was we'll just have to keep the speed up, much like with the F-22, to get it flying. But another crucial point is the center of gravity. I have a separate video on determining the center of gravity for swept wing aircraft. The center of gravity for the F4 was in the correct point. That is very important. You can see how I had to move a lot of the weight back to include the battery pretty close to the tail of the aircraft to meet the very important and strict center of gravity requirements for this swept wing F4 model. So now it's a moment of truth. Let's head out to the field and let's see the introductory marks before the test flight. So we're here at the field. It looks like a good morning. No wind, sun's a little bit low in the sky, but that's the way it is in January. So we'll give a chance to fly the F4 here. This is going to be an interesting flight. Obviously a flat wing, a little bit of positive incidence, not as much wing area as I think I would like in a perfect world, but we're just going to give it full power and just keep our fingers crossed that it flies okay. So we'll give it a shot. I'll hook up the battery, then we'll take it for test flight. So now let's do the test flight. It's a hand launch, and I will say, spoiler alert, it was probably one of the shortest RC model flights I've had in my model flying career. So here we go. And let's take a second look at that test flight. This time I'll slow it down into slow motion. So why did it not fly? Let's discuss that. What are the lessons learned? First of all, after that crash, it was a test prototype. The nose broke off and it was unflyable after that initial test flight. So there's no second chance to get this right. So I think the thrust was sufficient. I think the weight within limits. I know the center of gravity is okay. And the controls all worked okay. There were no reverse controls. So everything was in place to maybe have a successful flight. The learning point, looking back on it, thinking about it, looking at the video, was the nose moment, the distance from the center of gravity to where the propeller was. That was a very large distance. The elevators were going to have to do a great deal of work to keep the nose up at a very low airspeed. The elevators just couldn't do that with just a kind of gentle hand launch. Maybe if the F4 had landing gear, I could accelerate, get up to flying speed, then lift off with the elevators. It might have been a different situation. But if you remember looking at the F-22, when I launched that, it flew fairly slow. However, the F-22 has a lot of wing area. Even portions of the body can produce lift with that. The ailerons, the elevons actually are pretty big on this. And so I had a lot of up elevon authority on the takeoff. There was a lot of wing area. And you can see that the F-22 just barely got flying speed and kept the nose up on the launch. We'll take a quick look at that again. With the F4, at that slow launch of the airspeed, the elevators just didn't have a chance. They didn't have enough airflow over them, airspeed, to provide the necessary control input to keep that nose up. So what that means is the key to the F-22 success, you can see this has a fairly long nose moment as well. The catch is there's no weight on that nose, it's just foam board here. The weight of the motor, the batteries, is located about here, is very close to the center of gravity, which is about here. So what that means is the elevons don't have a lot of weight on the nose to overcome to pitch up for that initial takeoff because the weight of the motor is right over the center of gravity. I think if I'm going to build another F4, and I'm still thinking about it, I'm going to have to figure out a way to put that motor, the battery, that heavy weight near the center of gravity so that the elevators can have more effectiveness at a low airspeed. In addition, with the F4 model, I had elevators and a fixed stabilizer. The real F4 had a flying stab. The whole stab moved. I might take an approach like that just to have more effective stab authority for a hand launch at lower airspeeds. And we'll see if that approach works. So the conclusion, we all learn from our building and flying mistakes. In this case, the F-22 we know flies very well. The key most likely was having the engine near the center of gravity so the elevator could work at slow airspeeds for a hand launch. There's no landing gear. Every takeoff is a hand launch. With that heavy motor out in front of the F4, it was just too much weight to overcome for the elevators to keep the nose up at that slow airspeed, resulting in a crash. The other thing I would do on a follow-on F4 design for sure, make the wing bigger, just a bigger wing. You can get away with making it a little bit non-scale. It's a foam board model. It'll still look like an F4, and I think that'd be a necessary thing for the model to fly. So thank you for tuning in. I hope this video helped with your modeling, building, and design efforts, and good luck with your future foam board and balsa RC products.